The universe is not supposed to rhyme. Things are meant to happen randomly with no author, no plan, no sixth sense of humor arranging the pieces. And then you run into a story so neat, so perfectly timed, that the random universe explanation starts to feel like the crazy one. These five did not break any laws of physics. That is what makes them so hard to sit with. They are all completely true, and not one of them should be. TSUTOMU Yamaguchi. It's the morning of August 6th, 1945, and a 29-year-old engineer named TSUTOMU Yamaguchi is walking through the city of Hiroshima toward a train, finishing the last day of a long business trip. He works for Mitsubishi designing oil tankers, and he has spent the summer away from home in Hiroshima on a project. Today, he is finally heading back to his wife and infant son. He has his travel documents. He steps off a tram, realizes he has forgotten his official seal, and turns back to go get it. A small errand. A few wasted minutes. At 8:15, the sky turns into a second sun. Yamaguchi is about 3 kilometers from the center when the first atomic bomb used on a human city detonates above Hiroshima. He sees a flash, what he later describes as the light of a giant magnesium flare, and on instinct he throws himself into a ditch. The blast wave picks him up anyway and throws him. He comes to with his eardrums ruptured, his upper body badly burned, temporarily blinded in the unnatural dark of the dust cloud now blotting out the morning. He survives. He drags himself to an air raid shelter, finds 2 co-workers who also live through it, and spends a nightmarish night in the ruins of a city that no longer exists. Around him are tens of thousands of dead and dying. And then this is where a survival story turns into something stranger. Yamaguchi does not stay. The next day he gets on a train, burned and bandaged and half-deaf, and travels home so he can rest and recover in safety with his family. Home is Nagasaki. On the morning of August 9th, 3 days after he watched one city vaporize, Yamaguchi is back at work. He is in his Mitsubishi office, bandages wrapped around his wounds, telling his supervisor about the blinding flash and the single bomb that flattened Hiroshima. His boss tells him he is insane. No single bomb can do that. How can one weapon destroy an entire city? At that exact moment, 11:02 in the morning, the sky over Nagasaki turns into a second sun. The light of a giant magnesium flare floods the office. He is, again, about 3 kilometers from the center of the blast. He drops to the floor as the second atomic bomb used on a human city goes off almost directly above him, in the middle of the sentence where he is trying to describe the first one. He survives that too. His bandages are blown off. He is dosed with radiation a second time in 3 days. He makes it home through a second ruined city to find his wife and son also alive. And TSUTOMU Yamaguchi goes on to live. Not for a few bitter years, but for decades. He raises his family, he works, he grows old. The Japanese government eventually recognizes him in 2009 as the only person officially certified to have survived both atomic bombings, a double survivor. He dies in 2010 of stomach cancer at the age of 93. Think about the geometry of that life. There are exactly 2 times in human history a nuclear weapon is dropped on a populated city. The same man is standing under both of them 3 kilometers out each time and walks away from both to live into his 90s. The odds against that are not large. They are almost the wrong kind of number to think about. He forgot a stamp, turned around, and accidentally bought himself a front row seat to the only 2 events of their kind that have ever happened. Halley's Comet and Mark Twain. It's November 30th, 1835, in the tiny village of Florida, Missouri, and a baby named Samuel Langhorne Clemens is being born into a world that has a comet hanging over it. The comet is Halley's. It swings close to Earth roughly every 75 to 76 years, a giant dirty snowball on a long, predictable loop. And in 1835, it is making one of its visits, blazing across the sky right around the time Clemens enters the world. That baby grows up to become Mark Twain, the most famous American writer of the 19th century, the author of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, the man who more or less invents the voice of American literature. For most of his life, the comet of his birth is just a piece of trivia, the kind of thing a man like Twain, who loves a good line, files away for later. He pulls it out in 1909. He is 73 now, his health failing, his wife dead, his fortune burned through and rebuilt. And he says something that should just be a writer being a writer, a nice turn of phrase about his own mortality. He says he came in with Halley's Comet in 1835, that it is coming again the next year, and that he expects to go out with it. He says the Almighty has, no doubt, decided that these two unaccountable freaks came in together and must go out together. It is a great line. It is also, by every reasonable expectation, going to be wrong. People do not get to schedule their deaths around astronomy. The comet is coming back on its fixed orbital timetable whether Twain is ready or not, and there is no medical reason his heart should care. Halley's Comet reaches its closest approach to the Sun in April of 1910. Mark Twain dies of a heart attack on April 21, 1910, the day after the comet's perihelion, as it blazes over the Earth on the exact return he predicted. He comes in with the comet and he goes out with the comet, 75 years apart, with the two appearances of a chunk of ice that orbits on a schedule older than humanity, bracketing his entire life like bookends. He chose himself. The universe did not have to grant him the line. It did anyway. King Umberto I and his doppelganger. It's July 28, 1900, in the Italian city of Monza, and King Umberto I has just walked into a small restaurant for dinner, where he is about to meet himself. Umberto is the King of Italy, in town for an athletics event he is due to attend the next day. He sits down to eat, and the owner of the restaurant comes over to take his order personally, because you do not let a waiter handle the king. And the king looks up at this restaurant owner and feels the floor tilt. The man is his exact double. Same build, same face, same beard, same eyes. Not a passing resemblance, a mirror. The king, unsettled and fascinated, starts asking the man questions. And the answers get worse, or better, depending on how you feel about your skin crawling. The restaurant owner's name is also Umberto. They were both born on the same day, March 14, 1844. They were both born in the same city, Turin. The restaurateur married a woman named Margherita, which happens to be the name of the king's own wife, the queen. The restaurateur opened his restaurant on the very same day Umberto was crowned King of Italy. The two men have been living parallel lives, point for point, without ever knowing the other exists. The king is so taken with this that he invites his double to the athletics event the following day and says he wants to award him an honor. The next morning, July 29, the king is told that the restaurant owner, his double, has died that very day, shot dead in some accident with a firearm. Umberto barely has time to register it. That same evening, July 29, 1900, as the king is greeting the crowd at the athletics event, a man steps forward out of the audience. He is an anarchist named Gaetano Bresci who has come to avenge protesters killed by the state. He raises a revolver and shoots King Umberto I 3 times, killing him. The king dies on the same day as the man who shared his name, his birthday, his birthplace, his wife's name, and his coronation date. 2 Umbertos, born the same hour in the same city, living invisible mirrored lives for 56 years, both dying by gunshot within a day of finally meeting each other. You could not put this in a novel. An editor would cross it out and tell you nobody would believe it. The Jim twins. It's 1979 in Ohio, and a 39-year-old man named Jim Lewis is about to phone a stranger who has the same first name, the same life, and the same face as him. Jim Lewis was adopted as a baby and grew up knowing he had a twin brother out there somewhere, separated from him about 4 weeks after birth, and raised by a different family. As an adult, he finally decides to track that brother down. He finds him living elsewhere in Ohio. The brother's name is Jim Springer, 2 identical twins, raised in completely separate homes, who never met, never spoke, never compared a single note about how to live a life. When researchers at the University of Minnesota get hold of their case, the list of overlaps reads less like genetics and more like a haunting. Both were named James by their adoptive parents with no coordination. Both went by Jim. Both grew up with an adopted brother. Both had a childhood dog named Toy. Both married a first wife named Linda. Both divorced her. Both then married a second wife named Betty. One named his son James Allan. The other named his son James Allan. Same name. 1 letter apart. Both worked in law enforcement as part-time deputy sheriffs. Both did woodworking in their spare time, building furniture and workshops in their garages. Both drove the same model of Chevrolet. Both vacationed at the same stretch of Florida beach, driving there in those Chevrolet. Both chain-smoked the same brand of cigarette. Both bit their fingernails down. Both suffered from the same pattern of tension headaches that started in their late teens. None of this is arranged. Nobody is copying anybody. Two people who share the same DNA are dropped into different houses, different towns, different families, and they grow toward the same names, the same wives, the same dog, the same car, the same beach, like two seeds of the same plant putting out identical leaves. The case becomes one of the most famous in the history of twin research, the centerpiece of a long study into how much of who you are is written in you before you take your first breath. And the unsettling answer the Jim twins point at is a lot more than anyone wanted to admit. You like to think you chose your wife, your hobby, your car. Two men with the same code chose the same Linda, the same Betty, the same workshop, without ever meeting. It raises a question you cannot fully shake. How much of your life are you actually picking, and how much is just the seed unfolding the way it was always going to? Edgar Allan Poe and Richard Parker. It's 1838, and Edgar Allan Poe is publishing a novel about four men starving in a lifeboat who decide to eat one of their own. The book is the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, Poe's only complete novel, a strange and grim sea adventure. In one of its darkest sequences, a ship goes down and a small group of survivors end up adrift in an open boat with no food and no water, slowly dying. Driven mad by hunger, they do the unthinkable. They draw lots to decide who will be killed and eaten so the others can survive. The one who draws the short straw, the young cabin boy who gets murdered and cannibalized by his starving crewmates, is named Richard Parker. It is fiction. Poe invents the scene, invents the name, invents the whole horrible little ritual of the lottery. The book is not a success in his lifetime, and he dies in 1849, more or less broke the way he did most things. Now jump forward 46 years. It's 1884, and a yacht called the Mignonette is sailing from England toward Australia when it is struck by a wave in the South Atlantic and sinks. Four crew members escape into a tiny lifeboat. They have almost no food and no fresh water. They drift for weeks under the open sun, eating a turtle they catch, drinking their own urine, watching the horizon for a rescue that does not come. The youngest of the four, the cabin boy, drinks seawater out of desperation and falls gravely ill. As he lies dying and the others face starvation, the senior men make the same decision Poe wrote half a century earlier. They kill the cabin boy and eat him to stay alive. They are rescued shortly after, prosecuted, and their case becomes one of the most famous in the history of English law, a landmark on whether sheer necessity can ever justify murder. The cabin boy on the Mignonette, the real boy, killed and eaten by his starving crewmates in a lifeboat in the exact way Poe described in his made-up novel, is named Richard Parker. Poe did not just write about a shipwreck and a cannibalized cabin boy. He wrote about a shipwreck and a cannibalized cabin boy, with the specific name of a real person who would be cannibalized in a real shipwreck almost half a century after the book came out, and decades after Poe himself was in the ground. He reached forward through time and named a death that had not happened yet. So what do you do with 5 stories like these? The cold answer is that the world is enormous and old, billions of people living billions of days, and if you let it run long enough, freak alignments are not just possible, but guaranteed. Somewhere, a man was always going to forget a stamp and survive 2 bombs. Somewhere, a writer was always going to die on schedule with a comet. Given enough cabin boys and enough shipwrecks, one of them was eventually going to share a name with a character in a forgotten book. That is the rational reading, and it is probably correct. But that is not the reading your gut hands you when you hear them. Your gut hears a king meeting his own double the day before they both die by gunshot, and it does not feel the cold math of probability. It feels like someone is writing this. It feels like a pattern with intent behind it. And the strangest fact of all might be that, 1, the way human beings are built, so that no matter how well we understand randomness, some part of us refuses to believe the universe is really making it up as it goes.